Hey everyone, and welcome back, or welcome to the channel. We have returned with the Acura ADX. I've been living with this luxury subcompact crossover for a week now, and it is time to do a fuel economy run. As you guys know, the ADX is essentially a Honda HR-V with a Honda Civic Si engine, and I'm curious to see if this vehicle, not only with it being affordable in its segment, can it be efficient, and that is going to be the question I am going to answer today. So to give you guys a bit of a refresher here, what does this crossover offer? You're looking at a 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine producing 190 horsepower and 179 pound-feet of torque. It is unfortunately paired with a CVT. Fuel economy numbers come in at right around 25 miles per gallon in the city and 30 miles per gallon on the highway if you go with all-wheel drive, and that's exactly what we have here with this Acura ADX. For all three trims, you are going to have a fuel tank capacity of 14 gallons. So hypothetically, if you do hit 30 miles per gallon on the highway, you'll be able to do about 420 miles on a full tank and on a road trip. So I'm curious to see if we can hit that 30 mile per gallon mark. Now it is time to go over those guidelines for this test for those of you who are new here. We're going to stick to factory requirements, which means out of the Acura ADX and this small 1.5 liter Turbo 4, Honda does recommend premium fuel. So that means we will be filling up with 93 octane at Shell. So it is kind of costly here for this luxury subcompact. You would think that for a vehicle like this, we would be on 87, which is the minimum requirement, but seeing as though that Honda and Acura recommend it, we're going to stick with that. We're going to do a 100-mile round trip, 50 miles down, 50 miles back, going south and northbound for a fair comparison. Also on the highway, we will set the cruise control between 65 and 70 miles an hour. And then the last guideline will be drive mode. With the Acura ADX, it's a bit interesting. There's no eco mode out of this vehicle, which we never use for these tests, but there's comfort, normal, and sport. So we're going to stick with normal for today's test and see what we can get here out of this luxury subcompact. All right, so we have topped off the Acura ADX with fuel, and we're ready to rock and roll on this 100-mile round trip. As I normally do, I will interject at times to talk about the cruise control, lane centering, obviously the interior insulation, because that is one quality I have liked about the Acura ADX so far. And even though it is somewhat like a Honda HR-V, interior insulation is definitely better than its mainstream cousin. There's also some other qualities too that I like here, so might have a lot to say about the Acura ADX. All right, so I think we've been on the road long enough to test out the decibel meter to see how loud or how quiet the cabin inside the Acura ADX is. And I gotta be honest here, looking at the decibel meter, I'm a bit surprised because I thought it was gonna be a bit quieter. I will close that shade to see if we can get a better reading, but I'm a bit stunned. So I don't know if you guys can see this, it says 69.5 decibels. 69.5 decibels would be right in line with the Ford F-150 Tremor and the 4Runner Trail Hunter. I thought it was quieter than that. So let's close the shade and see if we can get a quieter reading. All right, so with the shade closed, I'm at 68 decibels. So we're saving a decibel there, which would now undercut the F-150 and Trail Hunter that we have recently featured and done this exact same test. I know a lot of you have been messaging me and commenting in every single video saying, close the sunshade, close it. And so I did, and yeah, there was a slight improvement there. So, all right, but I do think compared to the HR-V, and I'm gonna need an HR-V to test out now, I think it's still quieter than an HR-V. It feels a bit more refined for sure. In regards to the adaptive cruise control and lane centering, my thoughts are a bit mixed on this vehicle. I'm going to start off with the good. The lane centering is phenomenal. For a vehicle coming in below $50,000, there's no overcorrecting here, and it stays in its lane very well, very hands-off, in my opinion. The adaptive cruise control, though, is kind of polar opposite. It is way too overreactive. So there are times where, even in this situation, you guys can't see the car in front of me, where it will brake. And a couple of days ago, I was on the highway testing this out, And I kind of felt bad for the person behind me because it seemed like I was brake checking them. And that was not my intention at all with the adaptive cruise control. And then when you are lane changing, it takes forever for it to accelerate. It takes about 3 to 5 business days for it to decide, oh, you want to go 75 miles an hour and pass that slower driver? I'll think about that and then I'll go. But again, this is using Honda technology, so at that point, I'm not going to sit here and complain, although I do think luxury brands could probably do better at this particular price point, around $45,000. So for me, I'm not a huge fan of the adaptive cruise control. Lane centering, it's pretty good. All right, so we have reached the 25-mile mark on this 100-mile round trip, and I'm currently sitting at 32.5 miles per gallon. We're already overachieving here. Now, this could be because we're using 93 octane. It seems like premium fuel, we get a little bit better fuel economy, so take it for a grain of salt. However, one thing I'm going to say here out of the ADX is that I have not enjoyed this CVT. I haven't really enjoyed this 1.5 liter turbo either. However, in adaptive cruise control, it's tolerable. Because when you're on throttle the entire time, it's droning, kind of loud, doesn't really feel refined. But adaptive cruise control is where this vehicle, I get it. If you are commuting on the highway, throw it into adaptive cruise control and just sit back. Because you're going to be comfortable. A lot more comfortable than the HR-V, but you get a couple benefits. Fuel economy seems to improve when you're not constantly on throttle and you let the vehicle do its thing, and also not as much droning. But that is the big drawback, though, out of the ADX. Doesn't matter if I'm a quarter of the way through on this test or even just a quarter of way through my week with the ADX. It's this engine and the transmission. I wish they just dropped in a hybrid powertrain. It would just solve so many problems for this vehicle. But aside from that, no complaints. No complaints at all so far. But let's see what we can get at the halfway point and see if we can improve on these numbers, and also I'll give you guys more thoughts on the ADX and my time with this vehicle over the past week. So we're now in traffic, and I'm about, I'm gonna say 2 miles away from my exit at this point. We're averaging 33.1 miles per gallon, which is pretty good. I have a feeling this number is gonna drop now, since we are gonna be in this stop and go traffic for a bit, and then obviously getting off the highway. This is a first. this is the first. We had that rolling roadblock earlier on, and now we're stuck in this traffic. Not ideal for a Saturday morning at 9:20. So, yeah, hopefully I can get through this quickly. I'm kind of on a tight schedule today, and I thought I could squeeze in this MPG test. So I'm a little bit stressed right now, but this does simulate a weekday commute because you will inevitably hit traffic. So there's a bright side to everything. So we have now reached the halfway point. I have no idea what that traffic was all about because it cleared up right after my exit. But we're now averaging right around 32 miles per gallon, so slightly overachieving compared to the numbers that are on paper. However, as we experienced there, if you're going to be in stop-and-go traffic, you're definitely not hitting 33 miles per gallon, and you're probably not hitting 30 miles per gallon if you are commuting to work every single day and you're going to be in that traffic for an hour, hour and a half. But either way, though, the ADX is still proving to be somewhat economical here. It's just that I'm demanding that 2-liter hybrid out of the Civic. I think it would really go a long way for this vehicle. But the main takeaway, though, out of the Acura ADX is that it's comfortable, it's quiet, and mostly for its on-road mannerisms, that's the biggest difference compared to the HR-V. If you're someone who likes the HR-V but you want a bit more, then the ADX is going to really impress you. You're going to like the 1.5 compared to the 2-liter that's found in that HR-V. You're going to like the interior materials. You're going to like the interior insulation. You're going to like the ride quality. And that's where Acura really infused their own DNA into this vehicle. Why I don't look at this as being a twin to the HR-V. It's actually somewhat different. So don't let the platform fool you. Don't let the Honda interior fool you. This vehicle is quite different. And considering its price point, starting at $37,000 and going to $44,400, it is worthy of being a great choice in this market because it does undercut the German and European rivals. I do have to say this, and I want to be fair about the Acura ADX. Over the past week, it has not been the most enjoyable. I don't like the CVT. I don't like the droning. And especially for our model, the A-Spec Advance, you're spending $44,400, and in my mind, it would be better to look at the German and European rivals, definitely when it comes to performance. But this trip today, though, is leaving a lasting impression. This is a great way to send off the ADX because if you are someone who does go on the highway frequently and you commute to work, this vehicle is actually quite good. It is quite well-rounded. It's just getting past the performance that I'm having difficulty with this vehicle. But if you're someone who wants luxury and you want affordable luxury, the ADX is worthy of your time and consideration. So now that we are ready to set off on the second leg of our trip, I want to give you guys one more rule. For those of you who are new here, we do one click at the pump. One click, everyone knows the rules. Some people have different methods, but it has been pretty accurate with the digital gauge cluster, so we're going to stick with the one-click method. I will say this, I think on the way back, we're going to see the fuel economy drop even more because I expect more traffic, but also we're heading northbound. So maybe this will average out around 30 miles per gallon, but either way, I mean, it has been somewhat efficient here in all the situations that we have thrown at it this week and for this particular test. So as you guys know, on these trips back, I give you guys my final thoughts and my opinions on the vehicle I am testing. And with the ADX, I think there's a bit more nuance because on one hand, I could sit here and say the Acura ADX is an HR-V. It's an HR-V with different front and rear fascias, slightly different interior aside from the technology, but that's basically it. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to say this is like a Ford Mercury situation like we have with the Explorer and Mountaineer, but at least right now, in this class, it's almost kind of a carbon copy, but it's not a twin. In some ways, and I talked about this during the full review, the ADX is a continuation of the HRV line. So if Honda had dropped in a 1.5 liter turbo in the HRV, there would be no purpose for the ADX at all. However, Acura did go one step further with the ride quality, the handling, the fit and finish. And this particular trip is doubling down on all of that for me, where yes, there is a clear distinction that on the lower end at around 37 grand with all-wheel drive, to pay an extra $5,000 to $6,000, is it worth it? I think it is. I think the powertrain, the handling, the suspension alone is worth the $5,000 difference. What I'm still struggling with is the A-Spec Advance at 44.4. And to reiterate my full review, we need the hybrid powertrain. Like, if you don't want to drop in a hybrid with the HRV, I get it. But for this particular vehicle, in this lineup, in this class, we need more performance. I don't know if you could say the same for the Integra, but for the ADX, we need a vehicle that's pushing over 200 horsepower, over 200 pound-feet of torque. And on top of that, better fuel efficiency. We need better fuel efficiency. And Honda is capable of this, Acura is capable of this, but they're just not going to do it for this generation, it seems. And I think that's a detriment to this crossover. I really do. Because I think with the hybrid powertrain and not having this CVT with the droning, and then also better fuel efficiency, you can overlook the Honda interior. You can overlook the platform sharing. And sure, we see platform sharing all the time. Hyundai and Kia, they're guilty of it. But Hyundai and Kia have a way where the vehicles don't feel the same. There's a difference for the interior. Technology now is shared, but there's a difference, even when it comes to the exterior appearance. With the ADX, it does kind of look like an HRV, but as I looked at it a little bit longer today, and like, it kind of looks like an Integra. So I can live with that. I can totally live with that. It's just that this vehicle could be better. It could be and can be better. And to get to better, it's not going to require a lot of work on Honda's end or Acura's end. But when you take a look at the sales figures, the ADX is killing it right now. It's outselling all of its competitors. Aside from the Lexus NX, which really isn't a competitor. I don't know why it's placed in this market. It's not priced to be in this market, but the NX is still popular. But the ADX, I think people like what it's offering, that it's just enough above the HRV where they can justify the pricing. It's just that for the Advance, I don't know. I really don't know. But this particular fuel economy test and spending time with this vehicle, having an adaptive cruise control and not dealing with the droning all the time, it's tolerable. This vehicle is tolerable as a daily commuter. And I get it. I get the value proposition. It's just that from Honda, from Acura, you can give us better. You can give us more. And that would be my main takeaway. That it can be better. We can get more. It's just a matter of Acura and Honda doubling down and providing that difference. We'll have to wait and see on that one, though. So we're now at the 75-mile mark on this 100-mile round trip, so 3/4 of the way through. I am currently sitting at 31.5 miles per gallon, which, with all things considered, with the stop-and-go traffic And now going uphill, to still be above 30 miles per gallon is pretty good. The one thing I still do not like here is this follow distance with the ADX. The adaptive cruise control is just way too aggressive. I'm getting tired of it at this point, especially now with traffic building. And it slows itself down so aggressively to the point where you're traveling at 50 miles an hour or 45 miles an hour. I saw it down to 45 a couple times. And then it accelerates so aggressively to get back to where I set the adaptive cruise control. And that's where I think we're losing a lot of the fuel economy, because it's not smooth. It is not smooth. And like I've said throughout the last two videos, it could be better. Everything could be better about this vehicle. And the adaptive cruise control is going to be part of that. It's going to be on that list. But aside from that, to still be around 30, 31 miles per gallon, the vehicle is still somewhat economical. And I don't know if we could get better out of European competitors. We'll have to wait and see on that one and see if we can test this out against an Audi Q3, BMW X1, Volvo XC40 to see if the numbers are a little bit better or maybe not so good compared to what we have here today with the ADX. But if you're looking for an economical daily, it's also comfortable. It checks off those boxes. I just think, though, that it could be better with the hybrid powertrain. One click, everyone knows the rules. All right, it is time to do some basic math here, which isn't going to require a lot of brain activity, because 100 divided by 3 is 32.3. But this trip isn't fully 100 miles, it's 99, and that still gets you to 32 miles per gallon. We overachieved based off of the digital gauge cluster. When I was getting off the highway, it said 32. So 1 mile per gallon, are we going to go crazy over that? And then obviously, you know, if we did more than one click, maybe we get down to 32, 31 miles per gallon. But still, you're kind of overachieving, slightly overachieving here with this vehicle. It's just that during this particular trip and what we experienced going in stop and go traffic, I think it's more likely you're going to hit 30 on the best of days. And then what I've experienced throughout my entire week with this vehicle, 27 to 29, realistically. But still, though, not that bad. You're hitting 30 miles per gallon. My only downside here to this vehicle now would be we have to use premium fuel. And so now you're paying extra at the pump because of that. Whereas with the HRV, you're going to be using regular. The 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder is not going to be that expensive to fill up, whereas with this ADX, it will. That would be the main drawback. You're paying extra for the performance. But I think with the ADX, you're getting a lot more than the HRV. And I would price here towards the base ADX or A-Spec at the most. When you get to the Advance at $44,000, that's where I'm having difficulty. That's where I can't justify it. But what this vehicle is giving you in terms of its performance, refinement, ride quality, handling, that gap makes sense in terms of the price point between the HRV and ADX. But there are some cons that come along with this vehicle that we've discussed and talked about over the past two videos, and having used premium fuel is going to be one of them after this week. But aside from that, to get over 30 miles per gallon in that traffic, 100 miles, you know, I would consider that a success here, and we didn't underachieve, and that's really the most we could ask for. So guys, let me know what you think here about the Acura ADX. Does this vehicle offer everything you're looking for, or are you still going to look at the competitors? Let me know. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.